Hey everyone, welcome to the replay office hours this Friday, April 1st. It's great to see you. Let me go ahead and there we go. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Super excited to be back this week. First, I have to give a thanks and shout out to Gerald for hosting last week. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed. I saw he did a lot of debugging, which is great. It's always awesome to see our people from our engineering team doing work because they're the ones who are closest to replay and the code, and they really know all those details, tips, and tricks. So yeah, hopefully that was interesting for you. If you missed it, you can check it out. We have the recording up on our Twitch, and we'll also be posting some highlights from that as well. So great. So um, just to reintroduce myself, I am Cecilia Martinez. I am the community lead here at Replay. We've been doing these office hours every Friday for about the past month. And so we take some time each week to show you what the new features are that have come out, what we have coming up on our roadmap, and then also digging into some replays and doing some live debugging and kind of showing some of those new features. So we also have this as an opportunity to get your questions answered. So if you have any questions about replay, anything about what we're working on, what you can and can't do with replay, answers you can do a lot, but feel free to ask questions in the chat and we will answer those for you as we go along. So, and it looks like we do have some people from the team on the chat as well. Hey, Gideon, good to see you. So they can probably help out as well. Good. Yeah, so I wanted to start out this week with a really cool, exciting announcement. We have finally released support for Coffeescript with Replay. So I know that many of you have been asking about this for a long time. It's one of our most requested features. Everyone's, kind of using this brand new framework and wanted to make sure that they could debug all of their applications that are using Coffeescript. So we heard you. We like to be as responsive as possible to user feedback, and after putting a lot of work into it, we finally have been able to release support for CoffeeScript. So I wanted to kind of walk through a replay with that for you today and show you what that looks like. So let me get my screen set up here. I know container excitement, it's a pretty big one. So um, awesome. I'm just checking the chat here. Okay, you look good. Okay, great. Yeah. So this is a CoffeeScript application. You can tell because the file is app.coffee. So I know it's like I said, it's kind of a newer framework. So if you're not familiar with it, that's okay. We'll walk through it. Just to kind of show you what this replay is. Again, with replay, you can record the runtime and then you can replay a video. We have a to-do MVC app. We're adding an item in our dev tools. As you can see, CoffeeScript, really unique syntax, very clean code. You don't have to have all the junk of parentheses in there like you see with JavaScript, but you still get all the great debugging tools that you would have with Replay. So we can see, how many times each line hits. We do have the app.js that it compiles to there. We have any errors and warnings that are logged to the console. We have we can also, of course, the magic of replay, add print statements. So we can here log our node event in context to the console. Oh, sorry about that. Let me do this here. Great, and so we can see, our submit event type is submit. It's trusted true. We have the object here in the console that we can see. So yeah, so like I said, a lot of work went into this. Very exciting. Check it out. We have a blog post that goes into all the detail about all the hard work that the team had to put in to create this. And so definitely make sure that you give that a read and check that out. Just to kind of show you here. So our replay blog does have that information, and you can also access this replay itself. This replay is public, so I can go ahead and copy that link and paste it in the chat here for you. But all of this comes from source maps, right? So if you haven't seen the source map visualizer from Replay, it is allows you to track the original source to the what's been generated by any kind of compiler that you're using. And so that's where a lot of this magic is happening. So really, we've just invested in general source map support. So any kind of language features like JSX, TypeScript, and then also, of course, Coffeescript, is easy. It just works in Replay. So thanks so much for having fun with me and checking that out. So like I said, I'll go ahead and post that link in the chat here if you want to play around with a cool Coffeescript replay. So great. All right, so on to real changelog news. So just to kind of let you know what this stream usually looks like, this format, I start with keeping you up to date on the latest releases. We do a changelog review, so we're always releasing new features, new functionality, improvements, and so I'd like to spend some time going over what we've done that week. Then I also talk about roadmap insights. So these are things that we're currently working on, some of our experimental features that are coming up. And then I also am available to answer any questions that people have. So if you do have questions, please feel free to post those in the chat. And then, to end things out, I just like to have a little bit of fun exploring some replays, checking out some recent ones that we've seen. And yeah, so and if you have any replays, if you ever have any bugs that you're working on that you've had a hard time trying to get figured out, please let us know. You can check us out in Discord, replay.io/Discord. The entire team works there. You can chat with us. You can share replays, and we can work on them with you. Somebody actually today talked to us about what we're now calling the Heisen bug. Essentially, it's something that works differently once it's observed, right? It's this principle. And in this case, there's a bug that exists, but it only works when you're recording it with the replay browser. So something is going on there that's making it really interesting once you're trying to capture it. So yeah, so we're working through that with them, helping to kind of troubleshoot and debug that. But we become better by working with all of our users. Replay is open source. We're really driven by the community and by our users' suggestions. So all of the things that you're going to see today, from the changelog to the roadmap insights to the replays that we'll be debugging, all is because of the community and the users that we have collaborating with us. So much appreciation. And if you'd like to get involved with that, please join us in Discord, replay.io/Discord. So first up on the changelog this week was pretty exciting. It's called Code Heat Maps. So we actually highlighted this as a roadmap insight on a previous stream, talking about kind of this idea that came up around how replay works and how it gives you information about what code is executing in the replay. So if you aren't familiar with replay, if you're not kind of sure how it works behind the scenes, what's happening is replay is essentially recording everything that's happening in that browser session when you make a recording. So we already have all of the information about what code is executed at a given time. Traditionally, what we have been doing before was fetching that information and generating it on demand. So for example, if, here in this kind of Coffeescript example that I already have pulled up on my screen, as you see when I hover over a line, it says 1 hit. So it's kind of showing me, and this is 0 hits, right? It's showing me how many times something has rendered. So in the past, you can kind of see it has like that loading and then it renders. We were fetching this information from the recording when you needed it. So we have all the information at the beginning though. So this idea came up, and I don't remember exactly where it came up from. I don't remember if it was from a discussion that we had in Discord, but this idea came up of, what if we could show you all the information about your code that ran at once? And this kind of concept of a heat map started to arrive. But initially, it was called live code analysis, and that was live code versus dead code. So showing you what code ran, what code didn't, what code was dead, what code was live within the concept of that recording. And that was how the work started. And it started by fetching all of the hit information at once. And that was what we kind of covered previously on our roadmap insight here as on the stream. And so I can pull up that GitHub issue for you just to kind of give you some context here. And so that was how it started. And things moved pretty quickly from there. And now this week we were able to release code heat maps. And again, this is a continuation in this like overall process. But the first step, like I said, was getting all the hit information at once when the recording is loaded instead of doing it on demand. And the second step was showing you that information. And so if I toggle over to this replay, which is just a recording of our demo, yeah, if you've used replay, you've definitely seen this before. It's essentially a game where you match three of a kind, and then when you win, it tells you to stop. So you're prompted to record this every time that you start replay for the first time to kind of get you used to the interface. So if we go back to DevTools here, and I take a look at my JavaScript code, so this is just a kind of one file, I have the same behavior. I'm kind of hovering, I can see the hits, but the thing that's helpful is if I go to the Source Explorer, so the Source Explorer icon contains what's called the outline of the functions in our application. And let me just refresh this really quick because it's kind of giving me some issues here. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so in our Source Explorer view, we have what's called our outline, which automatically shows you all of the functions that are defined in that file. So Replay will analyze this JavaScript file and will say, okay, here are all the function declarations, and it'll pull them out into the outline. Now what we do is we show you this number next to each function, and that shows you how many times that function was executed. And so this is kind of where you can start to see what this magic will look like. But if you think about if you're recording maybe like validation tests or automation tests where you're walking through like critical flows of your application and you're expecting certain functions to hit and then they don't, or if if you come in here and say, for example, you're using a framework like React where you're rendering components and you're seeing that things are rendering a lot, like you have a lot of hits for re-renders that you shouldn't have, maybe you have state update that you shouldn't have, that's where your code heat map can really become helpful for you in analyzing how your code is executing. And this is really exciting for us and for the team, and hopefully for you too, in that it's taking us to a place where we're not just helping you debug an individual issue in your code, right? So you have a bug, you record it, you debug it, it's fixed. We're helping you now get to a place where you're able to analyze the overall quality of your code and how it's executing from a big picture perspective, right? So you can come in here, you can start to see how is my code analyzing? How is my code executing? You can analyze that. You can say, is it running the way that I think it's supposed to be running? So you're able to get a better understanding of your code, which is really, as you can probably start to think of different examples of how you can use that in your own workflows, becomes really exciting. So I wanted to show you this. And this is also specific for each individual file. So you can come in here, you can open any file, you can see the code heat maps number. Obviously, this is a first step. We're thinking about other functionalities, actually, potentially visualizations of code heat maps, things that would pop up in the source file, maybe color coding. So if you have ideas for this, how you'd like it to look, please let us know, give us feedback, join us in Discord or reach out to us on Twitter, however, whatever is easiest for you, and let us know. So yeah, so that's code heat maps, and really excited to get any feedback that you have on that, or any questions that you have on code heat maps. And that is documented in our blog, and it will work on any replay now. So if you have an older recorded replay, it will fall back to the previous behavior. But any new replays that are being recorded now going forward will have the code heat maps. So if you are checking out an old replay and you're wondering where it is, just make a new recording and you'll be able to see that. We're also adding support to be able to kind of add that retroactively. But awesome. All right. So the next thing I want to review in the changelog is we had some pretty exciting CI updates this week too. So the team has, as we covered I think it was 2 weeks ago, we covered playwright tests. So we released the ability to record automated playwright tests with replay. And we've been making additional improvements to our CI since then. So with this blog post that went out earlier this week with some additional CI improvements, just to kind of recap what we've covered so far. We do have replay.io/playwright. So this is a replay package, an NPM package that gives you some functionality in order to be able to use a replay-enabled browser to record your automated tests instead of the regular browser that comes packaged with Playwright. It's really easy to set up. All you have to do is just update your configuration with the devices array that the package provides you, and then you can just record your tests, and it'll record it with the Playwright enabled browser. I'm sorry, the replay enabled browser to generate the recording. Alongside of that, we have the Replay.io Action Playwright GitHub Action. So what this does, it's actually a GitHub action that allows you to automatically upload recordings of failed tests to your replay library. So all you would do is set up your API key as a GitHub repository secret, add this action to your workflow, and whenever you kick off a test run, you will see the recordings generated. So we demoed this a little bit, not the GitHub action, we demoed this recording and uploading manually of Playwright tests about 2 weeks ago. So the GitHub action we've added around the same time. If you wanted to see an example of this, we do have an example from the Floating UI open source library. And I actually yesterday did a workshop with DevOps.js around debugging and CI/CD. And one of the things that we featured was this action, this GitHub action. And so we can see, for example, here, this is a fork of Floating UI that came from Ryan, who is the original engineer on the replay team who worked on this. But we can see that when a test fails here and we're using the replay enabled browser, what happens is it does generate those recordings for us and uploads them. So in the logs, we have some failed tests here. And excuse my scrolling. We also have the replays that are have been generated. So these are automatically added to my library, but they also do output to the log. And then with the replay GitHub action, it also actually posts it back, the failed recordings back to the pull request itself. But this is what the recording of the failed test looks like. You know, it has the bug in the test, and then it also has the same dev tools that you're used to, so you can debug it. And just to kind of show you that initial pull request that kicked this off, we can see here in Ryan's example that the GitHub Actions bot go ahead and posts those failed tests back to the pull request as well. So that is the GitHub action for recording playwright tests. Wanted to show you that first to give you some context for what was released this week. So we did have some CI improvements that were released this week. The first is that we've updated this action, which has an additional option now called upload all. It's an additional option that you can toggle as true. If instead of just uploading the failures, like the ones that I just showed you, it only uploaded the failed tests. If you want to have recordings uploaded of all the tests, including the ones that passed, you can enable this upload all input. And so again, coming back to here, this upload all, by default, it's false, but if you enable it to true, you can upload all recordings instead of only recordings of failed tests. So this can be helpful if you need recordings for validation purposes, if you just like to have the record in order to be able to compare something that does work versus something that doesn't work, which is a really important concept in debugging. That's an option that's now available to you. The other update that was made is we actually have a new GitHub action. And this is a GitHub action that allows you to upload recordings for other types of replays. So the action playwright is specific to playwright tests, right? You record your playwright tests, it uploads the recordings. but people also use replay in CI for other types of recordings. We've featured recently some, a blog post where somebody used replay node to debug an issue in TypeScript. That was Matush from the Stately team. There's people also, as I demoed before, using Playwright manually. So you can use Playwright as a node script to execute tests, or you can, if you wanted to use them separately outside of that GitHub action. You can also record Puppeteer tests with Playwright. I'm sorry, with Replay. So if you have Puppeteer test suite, you can also use a Replay-enabled browser to record those tests. And so the new GitHub action gives you the opportunity, that kind of same functionality, to upload to your Replay library using any of those other methods to record. And so it works similarly. You just add your team API key as a GitHub repository secret. You add this to your workflow, and any replay recordings that are generated as part of that workflow will be uploaded to your library. There is an option to make replays public on upload. So if you are working like an open source project, or if you're doing this for validation purposes, you can enable that to true, but it is false by default. So by default, the replays will be, only associated with your team. So any questions, let us know. Any feedback, let us know. We are increasing, we'll talk about this a little bit on our roadmap insights, but we are focusing on CI and replay. This is coming up this few months that are coming up now. We have a lot of exciting things in the works. You may have seen an example that went out in our newsletter recently about recording jest tests in replay. That is built on the replay node package that allows you to record node runtimes. And we are also looking at a Cypress recorder as well. So we've got some exciting things there. I came from a testing background. So if you don't know, I previously worked at Cypress and really spent a lot of time debugging flaky tests, helping people set up their CI integrations with automated testing. And debugging tests in CI is always difficult because it's that black box, right? You can't see what happened there. You have to reproduce issues. And with replay, the recording already exists. The replay is already there. So there's no need to reproduce. You can know exactly what happened and what caused that failure. So definitely seeing a lot of excitement around that. So stay posted and let us know what you think. So. All right. And the last thing that I wanted to show you is a couple of just things that we're working on within the replay library itself. So this is kind of one of these tests here was recorded from CI. If I go back to my library, I am using like a test team here. And if you're not familiar with the replay library, this is where all of your replays are stored. They're ones that are stored to your personal library or with any team. We have made some updates. One of the updates is because we're seeing more people record in CI, we're expecting a lot more replays to exist, right? It generates a replay for each and every failed test. So once you get to a certain number of replays on your home screen, you'll now be able to paginate. So that should help improve the, the performance of your replay library. We've also added the ability to decouple admins from role types. So that's pretty exciting if you have a large team and you want to have better granular control over the different types of roles on your team. And then we've also made some improvements to dark mode. So if you are a dark mode fan, I tend to switch back and forth. It depends on what I'm doing that day or where my eyes are at. But we also have been making a lot of incremental improvements to our dark mode, filling in all those little elements and gaps. So you should see some improvements there as well if you're using dark mode. So yeah, so that's the changelog review for this week. Hope you saw something exciting. If you have any questions, like I said, please let us know. We are always looking for feedback and we like to respond pretty quickly. So it's a lot more fun when we do this all together. So the next thing that I want to talk about is some of the things that we have coming up in in our roadmap. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is actually some events that we have coming up. So we do these Twitch streams every Friday. We're going to continue to do those, the replay office hours. We are also working on a couple of other events that are out in the community. So I know that Gerald mentioned last week that we're going to be at Reactathon. We're going to be sponsors there, and Mark Mark Erickson from our team is speaking at Reactathon. That's super exciting. I actually will be speaking at the React ATL meetup coming up on Tuesday. So Tuesday, April 5th. I'll kind of pull this up here and I'll post this in the chat. We're going to be giving a talk on debugging React applications. And so I am in Atlanta, React ATL. This is kind of my home meetup, so to speak. I've been going, attending React ATL meetups for the last 3 years. It is an online event. So if you're not in Atlanta, you can feel free to come join us, and check this out. But essentially, we're going to be talking about debugging processes in general, but what's specific to React applications. So it's kind of anytime that you're using a framework, especially a component-based framework, anything that has lifecycle methods where you're rendering components based on data, based on state updates, you can run into some trickiness that's makes things a little bit more difficult to debug. And so we're going to be talking through some of those specific issues that pop up with React applications and how you can approach them. We'll also be talking about how you can use replay specifically to see those incremental time re-renders, but also just some general approaches as well. So definitely check that out if you're interested. They are recorded, so we'll be posting the video for that as well afterwards. But if you're able to attend, that's Tuesday, April 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I also wanted to note that recently I did a talk for Women Who Code front end. That's one of the I'm a lead volunteer with Women Who Code front end. Really, really love the organization, do a lot with them. I think that they provide a lot of support to women in the tech community. And we did a talk recently, back in March, on debugging your debug process, essentially tips and tricks and approaches for debugging. And that recording has now been released online. So if you weren't able to attend, you can check that out. I will go ahead and post the link in the chat as well. But this is a webinar that we did. Slides are also available online, but it's all about debugging, your approaches to debugging, and having a good process for when you run into bugs. So we're going to be doing a lot more of these events. Stay tuned. We're actually going to be releasing a replay events calendar next week. That will help you kind of keep track of all these great things that are coming up. And if you have a meetup, an organization, a Twitter space, a Discord channel, whatever it may be, and you think that your users would benefit from learning more about debugging or about replay or about open source, time travel, whatever it may be, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to kind of share what we've been learning and talk through different use cases, workflows with your community and with your team. So great. So next thing I want to talk about is we're going to go back into replay here, and we're going to take a look at a new experimental feature. So if you aren't familiar with replay experimental features, I do want to show that we in our docs we have a page called experimental features, and this shows you how to enable them. I'm going to show you here in a second too. We have some current experiments. Honestly, we move pretty fast, so it's not always, sometimes like something will be experimental one day and then we'll release it the next day. But you always kind of want to keep an eye on this because there's some fun stuff that can show up there. And so if you're in your replay library and you click on your settings and you go to experimental, here's where you can toggle on and off some experimental settings. Some of these we have ended up releasing, such as React DevTools has obviously been released now. But I wanted to show you resolve recording. So resolve recording, I have checked. It allows you to mark a recording as resolved. So what does that mean? So we come back here, and if we're in the info panel, so that's the replay info, you can kind of see the events underneath, and you can see the information about the replay itself. If you have that experimental setting toggled, you'll see this drop down here that says active. So active, and then resolved. And so what this means is, say you have a replay recording of a bug. You are working on the bug. The bug may be linked to a GitHub issue or a Jira ticket or whatever type of tracking that you use. And you have identified the bug. You added a comment. You said, "Hey, we found it." Woo. So this actually lets you mark it as resolved. Again, this is an experimental feature, but you get some nice fun confetti. This feature was developed by our designer, John, so we call it John Fetty internally, and you'll see that in the pull request as well. But now this is marked as resolved. This is an experimental feature. It's still in development, so this doesn't really change anything in your library. Things that we're looking at potentially is, for example, being able to view resolved bugs, filter by that tag, being able to kind of do an update to any other place that you're linking that. So if you have ideas for, if you think that would be helpful for you to have a status associated with a replay, or you have some feedback on how you'd like that to function, let us know, but you can enable that in your experiments. Going back to our library and going back to our experimental view, I haven't tried this yet, so we're going to do it live. Let's see. Ha, there it is. Okay. So if you kind of saw what happened, I clicked a button a couple times and then two new options showed up in my experimental pane. So this is something where if you're watching this stream, you're in on the secret. It's only, and we talked about this before. So if you're in the experimental features and you hit Shift 9 times, you'll see some additional things pop up. These are extremely experimental. We don't talk about this in our docs. We don't talk about this like a ton. But if you are just really interested in some of the newest things, you're okay with some experimental behavior, proceed at your own caution, at your own risk. These are a couple of things that you can enable. So if you check off these two boxes, multiple controllers and replay snapshots, these two experimental features are what we're working on to allow for longer replay recordings. So right now, we recommend that you limit replays to around 2 minutes or less, the shorter the better, to prevent performance issues. We are now working on getting that up to 10 minutes, so 10-minute recordings. And that obviously allows for, if you think about use cases around reproducing bugs, if you're doing manual QA and you run into an issue, we've heard a lot that having longer recording times is something that's really helpful. So again, if you feel like being adventurous, you want to check that out, you can enable those from the experimental settings and you can do longer recordings, up to 10 minutes. Please, 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 if you do this, let us know how it works. Let us know if you run into any issues. Please keep in mind it's experimental. So like I said, proceed at your own risk, do it with something that is just, like an experiment, and let us know how it goes. Really excited to kind of hear some feedback there. And again, this is all in service of being able to have longer recordings in the future, which is something that we've heard a lot from. So yeah, so that is another feature that we have coming out soon on our roadmap. And those are some of the things that we've been working on. As I mentioned before, the other things that we're working on is, things in our CI/CD, replay CI recording tests. You can also always check out our public roadmap in our docs. So on the Contact Us page, we have a public roadmap in Airtable that you can click and view right from our docs. And this shows some of the things that we have coming up that we're working on and the associated GitHub links. So for example, we have mentioned support for comments. What that means is in a replay, when you have a comment and you wanted to add a comment to somebody, being able to, for example, at somebody, on your team, mention them directly to tag them in a comment. So if you're interested in that, you can comment on the GitHub issue. Team inboxes. This is something where we are seeing on a support perspective of people who have their users record replays for their support team. So being able to collect that external replays within a certain team perspective without having to give access to your entire team. As you can see, we have a lot of performance related things on our roadmap. Performance is something that is really important to us. We know that a lot of people out there are interested in the performance of their applications, and so you can check those out. We are working on improving source map support, showing the inactive code that is part of that kind of code heat maps work, and then a lot of things from the console. So if you played with the console, you know that there's a lot that you can do with it. One of the things other things that we added this week that I didn't even get a chance to show yet is that we now have multi-line support in our console. So if you wanted to just do like ABC and you do Shift Enter, you can do multi-line expressions. You can do that in the console. You can also do that in a print statement. So you can Shift Enter here and do multi-lines in a print statement as well. So we're doing a lot of these, just tweaks to developer experience, giving you a lot of those things that you would expect in other debuggers so that you can stay in a state of flow when you're working with a replay. So if you have any ideas, comments, the replay component stack, React component stack is on there. And then also a lot of improvements to our network monitor. So the network monitor was released in December or January, right around the beginning of the year. I don't remember exactly when. But the network monitor, as you may know, shows all the network requests going in and out of your application. We've made a lot of improvements to this since it was released. Improvements to what is being captured, including things we're working on better WebSocket requests for network requests, the headers, the response bodies. You can now add a comment to network requests as well if you need to reference one specifically. And so we have a lot more improvements planned for network requests. This can be really important when you're debugging, tricky API calls, ensuring that the right data is going out to your backend and coming back from your backend. So we definitely have heard some improvements that you'd like to see there. So we're working on those. So yeah, so definitely check that out. Again, that is linked from our docs on the Contact Us page. And you can check out the roadmap. And then again, if you ever have any feedback, you can reach us on Discord, GitHub discussions, or you can email us, support@replay.io. Happy to hear from you. Great. So I'm just going to check the chat for any questions, and then we will get into a replay and play around with it. Okay, looks like we're good. So one of the first replay I wanted to show you this week is actually one that I recorded from the open source web project. So go ahead and get this open here for you. And I'm going to check out the viewer first. So if you don't know what open source is, I'll go ahead and open that first. So open source is this really great project that is essentially your path to your next open source contribution. This page that we're looking at specifically has a lot of open source projects that are able and available for contribution. So if I've talked before about open source, I did wrote a blog post recently about a Twitter space that I did about contributing to open source and how you can contribute in a number of ways. You can push code, you can generate reproducible bug reports, you can add tests, you can review automated tests and try to debug them. You can write documentation, you can improve contributing guides and processes. And so contributing to open source is a really great way to gain experience, to learn, and also to have an impact on developer communities. And so when we saw this project, definitely thought it was really neat. And so Jason actually recorded a replay of the site, which allows you to kind of review open source different projects based on some factors, and then all of these kind of give you a chance to upvote to see more information and find the next project that you want to contribute to. So we made a replay of the site, and then I took some time and was playing around with it. So I have not, before I did this, I hadn't looked at the source code. I didn't pull it down. I'm not familiar with it. But I really think that replay is a good way to get accustomed to to get up and running with, to learn a new code base, because you're able to see the relationship between application functionality and what code is triggered without having to run it locally and reload and read and add console logs and then reload and every time. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you, was the workflow that I went through to kind of just play around with this site. So just to show the replay itself and kind of start from the beginning. it just tabs through a couple of the navigation and it tabs through kind of the view there. So short replay, but enough to be able to kind of dig in and see what happens. So if you've seen me debug a replay before on one of these streams or just in general, like on a, if we've done a call together, anything like that, you know that I love to add comments. And comments is how I document the process as I go along. So you're going to see some comments in here already. But whenever I'm kind of getting oriented to a new application in a replay, the first thing I actually like to do is take a look at the elements on the page. So I'm going to close the comments and I'm actually going to go ahead and change the view, and I'm going to dock to bottom to give us a little bit more space here. So what I did was I actually folded the sources panel into my console tab here. So this icon allows you to change the view. You know, you can dock to bottom, which is what I just did. You can also dock to left. So this actually might be a little bit better view just for the stream because it's, you know, you can probably see it better. And then we have the traditional view, which is dock to bottom right, which has the sources open. Right now, I'm not going to dive into the code just yet. So I think I'm going to do the dock to left. So dock to left gives me a nice big view of my application here, and it gives me kind of my console and the different tabs that I have available to me. So I'm going to go ahead and close the console logs. I'm going to start by taking a look at the React tab. So the React tab here, this is recorded, you know, in production. So we don't have the component names, but it's pretty easy to get a quick orientation of the relationship between the components because you can see them highlighted on the screen. So for example, this first one here is our kind of app level. This is our header. I can see that this is our little icon here. I can see this is our pizza icon. It has, I can see the class name associated with that and the children that it has. And then I kind of came in here, and as I'm hovering over and I'm looking at the menu items, right? So we have this menu item here. I can see here that we have some props. So we have active link discussed, which makes sense from where we are in the replay. It's discussed. And then what I'll do is once I kind of find a component, and again, if you already know the code base, then it's a lot easier because you know what component to go to. But if you're getting familiar with a new component, so if you go back a little bit further, here we can see now we're on a different link, right? And if I go to that same component again, it was right around here. Yes, okay. I can now see my active link is upvoted. So there's a prop called active link that is changing when I update my menu. And so that's kind of one way to get context there is by looking at the components. You can also take a look at elements. So with React, I like to go straight for the React components, but you can also do the same thing where you essentially, I come in here, I select this navigation menu, and I can see the DOM tree. I can see some of the data name here. So I can see, okay, this is a data name of popular. This button here has a data name of discussed. Yep, okay. And this one has a data name of recent. So I can also, and this one has a data name of upvoted. So I can see that those data name attributes are correlating to the active link prop in my React, right? So that kind of gives me a couple of clues around how these links are working and how they're connected to the React components and to the React state. All right, so I had some now familiarity around this active link. There's also a set active link function, a set limit, and then a user that's set to null. So starting to get closer, I have some ideas. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to reopen my sources panel. I'm going to go back to the default view, give myself a little bit more room. And next thing I like to do is kind of look at the events. So with a couple of things I can do. I went ahead and opened up the components, and I can see that there's kind of this primary nav, easy name, easy to kind of see and find. I can see what's kind of hit here. I can see these menu items. I can see the data here, but I can see that, you know what, this actually isn't referring to what I'm looking at. So I see secondary nav. I'm not seeing any hits there. And when I go into secondary nav, I can see, okay, now I'm seeing hits. Now I know that this is being executed against. This is an older recording, so we don't have the outline view with the heat maps. So that would be one indicator that I can immediately tell, okay, yep, primary nav, that's not the one we're looking at. We want to look at secondary nav. Because if I came in here and we had that new feature, I'd be able to kind of see right off the bat what was being hit and what wasn't. But I can come over here and I can hover and I can see, okay, now we have 8 hits. So that is being rendered 8 times. That does make sense. We have some hits here, and I can also see now that we have these links, right? Popular, upvoted, discussed, recent, and we have a handle change function here. This handle change function is responding to, event current target. So that is kind of handling our links. So I went ahead and created a print statement to log the current target out to there. And we can navigate through the different versions of this. So I'm going to make the console a little bit bigger since we're not looking at the, actually I'm going to go ahead and hide the video, or the viewer. And so as I kind of navigate through these, I can see my click here, and I'm clicking the data name of upvoted. And then after that, my navigation handle change is firing. And we can see the active link on this line is upvoted. And again, on this click, I'm clicking the data name of discussed, and we can see after that, when that navigation updates, the active link is set to discussed. So opening my viewer back up, obviously our navigation is changing as we're going through this, but we're also updating the posts as well, right? So again, if I replay my replay, and I kind of toggle back to the beginning here, where we're clicking through, we can see that the cards are changing as well. So I kind of wanted to track down what was happening there. And just for the sake of time, just taking a look at where we're at, I can see here that we have this active link, right? So active link and set active link. And in our console, we can see that popular, upvoted, and discussed. And that is being set by the click handler that we identified here. And we can see that set active link is passing through the link name. And the link name is coming directly from the attribute data name on line 15 here. So as we noticed earlier, we're taking a look at our HTML elements. That data name attribute then gets passed through to the prop of the component, which is setting the active link with that link name. And so I'm curious, like how are we getting these cards, right? Obviously they're coming from someplace. I can tell from the posts wrap, which is kind of the entire component for all the posts, that our grid display is kind of coming from this active link. And the active link is what's being used to fetch our data. So if we come up here in our component, I can see this is where our state is being housed. We have isGrid, active link, fetch data, limit, user, and that corresponds again back to our React tab. I can find that component here, and I can see that the state in our React Dev tools matches up with a state that's being defined in post wrap, right? So we have state true, which is isGrid. We have active link, which by default is popular, use state popular, but now is discussed because the point that we're at in the replay. I can see that the fetch data contains an array of the projects, and that is what's being used to populate all the posts or the cards that are being generated on the page. And I can see that go ahead and reduce this again, collapse it. The limit is 25, so that's the default. We're only showing 25 cards at a time. And so I can also see that we're using this kind of like Supabase library, right? So we have fetch recommendations up here on line 7, and that's coming from library Supabase. And so now now that I know that we're fetching these posts from somewhere, it's coming from an API call. Now I'm interested in network requests. So if I go to network requests and I filter, so there's a couple of things I can filter by. We see we have a lot, right? So that's pretty common. I mean, we didn't do too much when we already had a lot of network requests. So if you're recording any kind of production site, you're probably gonna have a lot of network requests that are taking place. So you can filter them. You can either search. So if I wanted to, I could do like Supabase and search there. If you're not sure of the exact endpoint or domain that you're trying to hit, you can also filter requests by type. So I'm going to filter by fetch XHR, and here's where I can see the requests that are going out, and I can see we're hitting this recommendations endpoint. So if I go back to the first one here, I can see that the response are the 25 items. So this is where we're getting those response names. And I can see in the kind of header that goes out on the request, I can see the query parameters, right? And so we have select the repo name, the description, stars, issues, total stars, average recency scores, contributors votes, limit 25, total stars descending, nulls last. And that order, that total stars descending, right? As we saw before, popular was the default view. So that is kind of why it's organized by that order. So if we were to come to the next one here, we can see that this request is votes descending, nulls last. So that would kind of correspond to the next claim there that was, let me see, upvoted, right? So the nulls last upvoted, that would make sense. The things that are going to be more upvoted are going to be first. And then if we go to the next one here, go ahead and fast forward to this one. We can see that this query parameter, that's what we're just looking at here, has issues descending nulls last. So those are the ones that, again, that last kind of active link descriptor that we talked about was discussed. So if they have a lot of issues, they're more discussed. So nulls last descending is going to have the most discussed, the most issues items first. So we can see how what the active link is in React is corresponding to the query that goes out to the network request. And it's essentially updating the order. So we're still getting that same content. It's just how we're ordering it is different. So yeah, so that's pretty, and the thing that's kind of neat is you can add comments to these network requests, right? So I have this comment here, this get recommendations, initial request for 25 projects. When I click on it, it takes me directly to that exact network request. So if I'm debugging it, I can check it out. I can see what the response was. The other thing that's cool though too, is it also takes me to the point in the code. So like where that's associated with. So we get a lot of information, and again, adding those comments is critical because anybody else who comes and looks at this replay after me will already have that context and can start playing around with it. So yeah, so this is a public replay. I'm gonna go ahead and share the link in the chat. I'm gonna be adding it to our examples page as well, and I recorded a quick Loom video talking about some of these things. I hadn't talked about the network request before, that's a new thing, so feel free to come in here, play with it, add more comments. If you discover more fun things and you want to add comments there, you can. So yeah, this is just kind of an example of how you can use a replay to get associated with a new code base if you've never seen it before and you wanted to, if you're learning React and you just find a React app and you want to record it and start playing around with it, it can really help you start to see some of those patterns that people use in real world applications. So great. Awesome. So we're kind of coming up to the end. I'm just going to double check the chat. I don't see any questions, but thank you so much for joining us for our office hours this week. Just to kind of recap, we're going to be doing this again next week. We always talk about changelog review, roadmap insights, answer any questions that you have, and we do some dig into some replays. Hopefully I'll see some of y'all on Tuesday for the React ATL meetup. And if you have any events that you'd like us to participate in, please feel free to reach out in our Discord, replay.io/Discord. So everyone enjoy your weekend. Thanks again, and we'll see you around. Cheers.